Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I'm Ryan Bolin. Thank you all for joining me. What I want to talk about in this video is an article I read from the Breitbart News in reference to a play that was done, I think, a few days ago. And it's in reference to a victim who was raped, I believe, by a pedophile, and how that this particular article from the Washington Post basically soft pedals and spanks the hands, so to speak, or taps the hands, so to speak, of the individual that was the molester, and the one that was molested, the victim, is shown as someone who's a crybaby. You got that right. Shown as someone who's a crybaby. Now, I want to read this article. This article is an opinion piece written by John Nolte. John Nolte, I believe his name is. It's an opinion piece, but I want to read this opinion piece because his opinion is in line with my own opinion. So once I've completed reading a significant portion of the opinion piece, because you really need to hear this, then I'm going to give you my detailed opinion, because I think that the best answer for these types of things going on in our society isn't so much to stop it, because you can't, what do you want to do? The answer to me isn't to stop it. The answer is to expose it so that you give more people the option of saying, hey, this is that and that is this, and I'm going to choose this direction versus just covering it up. So let's get right into this article. And it starts off, the far left Washington Post reviewed a scintillating new play called Downstate that ruminates on the idea that punishments inflicted on some pedophiles are so harsh and unrelating as to be inhumane. Now, just pay attention to this, man. This is just some crazy stuff. Now, here's this guy's opinion. He says, now, I'm an adult who understands and appreciates the nuances and the complications of the human condition. I agree. I also appreciate how dramatizing, complicated, and even painful subjects can teach us something about our fellow man. I've seen and appreciated movies like Short Eyes, 1977, The Lie, 2001, Lolita, 1962 and 1997 versions, and Happiness, 1998, that dare to portray child abusers as human beings. In my mind, this approach, in the same way Downfall, 2004, humanized Hitler, makes the crimes even more horrific. It reminds us that real people are capable of monstrous acts. Instead of separating us by way of a one-dimensional portrayal as though evil emanates from a separate species, we're humbled by the knowledge that people like us are capable of unimaginable obscenities. And I agree with that statement 100%. That's the reason why I'm reading this particular opinion piece, because 99.9% of what he's saying, I personally agree with. Okay, that we are all capable of doing horrible things. None of us is beyond the ability to commit the most atrocious crimes. Why do I say that? Because as a preacher and as a Christian who believes the Bible is the word of God, Jesus said in Matthew, the 15th chapter, that out of the heart of man proceeds evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, theft, fornications. And the word fornication in that particular chapter, in particular verse, is a reference to all forms of sexual immorality, which would include pedophilia. Okay. We are all capable of doing some horrific things. So I agree with this John Nolte's statement here, but that we are humbled by the knowledge that people like us are capable of unimaginable obscenities. So he's absolutely right there. But let's read on. So a play that portrays a half dozen or so pedophiles struggling in post-prison life doesn't make my knee jerk. Relax. Let's see what the playwright has to say. So now he's about to read their particular criticism. He says, then I read this. The playwright has, quote, loaded the dice to some degree, as the predators are depicted not as monsters, but rather as complicated, troubled souls, end quote. There's a missing word there, remorse. And then it gets worse, much worse. And I guess this is, so now I'm reading what this particular article from Washington Post criticized, their statement about this play. And it says, Andy, which is the victim, arrives to confront Fred, the man who molested him. The playwright cannot hide his scorn for Andy, who has made a successful life for himself as a Chicago finance guy and now seems intent on some kind of purging reunion with the man who molested him as a child on a piano bench. Sounds really crazy, right? Kind of silly. But listen to this. It says, the meeting seems to be part of Andy's therapy, which, quote, downstate implies may be advisable, but at this point also suggests that it is an indulgent marinating in self-pity. That it is an indulgent marinating in self-pity. Basically, they're saying that this guy, Andy, is just a crybaby. You molested me. But we're going to read on. We are meant to note the chasm in Andy and Fred's circumstances and the perhaps overlong gestation of Andy's desire for that suspect experience, quote, closure. Fred's loss of mobility came about after he was set upon and beaten brutally in prison. So Fred, of course, is the molester. And they're saying in this article, Fred's loss of mobility came about after he was set upon and beaten brutally in prison. Context is all, for as Andy stumbles through a resuscitation of his psychic pain and suffering, oh, God, forget it. I'm tongue-tied, people. When he recites his psychic pain and suffering, we have the physical evidence of the price that Fred has already paid. Get that now. We have the physical evidence of the price that Fred has already paid. They're elevating Fred, the molester's physical pain over Andy's psychic or mental pain. Just follow this format. Just follow this reasoning. And it has in parentheses, beaten into a cripple in prison. Norris's justification in this regard feels cheap. There was a way, I think, to acknowledge the damage that's been done to Andy without judgmentally minimizing it. So according to the Washington Post, the playwright wants us to sympathize with the molester and see the victim as, quote, an indulgent marinating in self-pity. And if you read it, you can see clearly that they want you to sympathize with the molester, right? And demonize the victim. But the question goes into why. Why is this? Why is the Washington Post trying to do this? I'm going to read the rest of this. I'm going to read a significant portion more of this opinion piece, and I'm going to give you my opinion as well, which is basically in line with what he's saying, and John Nolte is saying here. He says, the playwright also portrays the victim's psychic pain as something less than the physical pain the molester lives with after being beaten in prison. So John Nolte in this article has here a list about 5 things that the left wants. He says drag queen story hours, homosexuality in Disney movies and TV, government-run schools encourages your kids to mutilate themselves on the altar of the sicko-trans agenda. Yes, that's true. All of this is true. Grown men in high heels share locker rooms with your young daughter. And finally, Tony-winning playwrights portray child molesters, which is what he's dealing with here, as sympathetic and their victims as self-indulgent. This is what the left's embrace of gay rights has always been about. Now, he's giving his opinion, right? Okay, now this is his opinion. And I agree with that because based on what I have studied in the past, that seems to be what the indication is. Right, but just listen to this. I'm not condemning gay people, which is same here. Although I as a Christian and as a minister of the Bible, I don't support that lifestyle. I also say you have a right to be whatever you want to be and live the way you want to live. Okay, so that's what I believe. You have a right to be what you want to be, live the way you want to live. Even though as a minister and as a Christian, I don't agree with that lifestyle. I have a right as a minister and as a Christian not to agree with it, as much as you have a right not to agree with my right not to agree with you. Let's go on. Plenty of gay people, he says, are disgusted by this stuff. This is about Democrats, leftists, and the perverts who have captured the dominant culture. The goal is twofold: to destroy traditional religion and have sex with your kids. Now, let's see. I'm going to see if we can read a little bit more of what he has to say here. I like a lot of what he's saying here because I agree with a lot of what he's saying. He says, this is what the left wants. This play is not just about seeing child molesters as human beings. It's about This is what I've been saying. It's about normalizing this behavior and sympathizing with the abusers while we shake our heads in disgust at the crybaby who can't get over being abused. Okay. And I'm gonna stop right there. You can read the rest of that article if you would like to in the description box below. Okay. But I'm gonna stop right there and give you my comment on it. But I agree with just about everything he just said. I totally agree with it. I believe that that's the ultimate goal. And I said this earlier in the video that Jesus talked about this being coming out of this darkness coming out of the heart of humanity, that we're all born with this darkness within us, and that all of us are capable of some of the most atrocious kinds of evils known to mankind. We're all capable of doing some horrible things, even if we don't do it. Okay. But you would have to ask the question, why would the Washington Post try to demonize this young boy, Andy, and make us sympathize with the child molester? It's simple. It's like John Nolte said. The purpose is to make what is evil good and what is good evil. That's the purpose. The purpose is deception. If they can't just come in and say, hey, this is okay and this is wrong, they just can't do that because they know most Americans would disagree with that. They know most Americans disagree with pedophilia. They know most Americans disagree with that. So they have to find a way to progressively demonize what is morally right and elevate what is morally wrong. And it's working because a lot of people, it seems, in many instances and in many circles, are laying back on it. They're not saying anything about it. They're not exposing it. They're not talking about it. Oh, it's just something that's happening, until it unfortunately happens to someone they know. Then they want to call the police. Then they want to get a psychiatrist. Then they want to do this and then they want to do that. Well, you didn't say anything about it before. So now the devil, so to speak, have crept up on you. But this is exactly, I agree with John Nolte here. This is exactly what they're trying to do. Now, when he says the left, it's not just the left. It's not just the left. It's those who claim to be on the right, but aren't really on the right. Now you say, well, that's a rough. You're conservative yourself. Yes, I am. I'm a conservative, but every conservative that say they're conservative is not a conservative. If your lifestyle is not lining up with conservative values, to me, you're not a conservative. Just like somebody professing to be a Christian. You can profess to be a Christian all day, but if your life don't line up with what you profess, then to me, you're not a Christian. Jesus said himself, I'm not trying to preach, but I'm just trying to show you some points here. Jesus said that everyone that say, Lord, Lord, is not going to enter into the kingdom of God. He said, you shall know them by their fruits. So the same principle here, the same principle with people who say, well, I'm a conservative, I'm a this, I'm a that. Well, your lifestyle has to line up with conservative values. And all the people who claim to be conservatives in politics and claim to be Republicans or whatever in politics are not. Okay, so they're along with this same concept of demonizing what is good and making evil look good. Demonizing what is good and saying evil and saying good is evil and evil is good. They're in the same boat because whoever's paying them the money to support this ideology is paying them the money to support this ideology, and they're slaves to that money. So whether they're on the right or on the left, they're still a part of the same team. But this is what's going on. And I agree with them. What they're trying to do is make you and I accept it. The purpose is to palmet you with this stuff as much as they can. It's all about, see, the radical left like to holler about misinformation and disinformation, but who really is doing the misinformation and disinformation? Clearly, that's what that is. Clearly. And like I said in previous videos, when you remove the concepts of morality, when you remove the concepts of right or wrong from our society, from our schools, from the politics, and even from some churches, which you have some churches where they literally have drag queens in the church in front of the pulpits with kids sitting on a floor in the church with a drag queen. There is no way on God's green earth you can justify that. You are a tool of the enemy. Period. Bottom line, I don't care what nobody say in the comment box. You can disagree with me all day. I don't care. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Period. You got churches or so-called churches doing this type of stuff. The very institutions that are supposed to be institutions of morality is falling for this propaganda. But not here. As long as God give me breath, I'm going to keep talking about it. And yes, the forces are after me, but I still got breath, so I'm going to still talk about it. If people like it, they like it. They don't, they don't. It is what it is. It needs to be talked about so that people have options. Now, in this video on this, I said this earlier. Our objective and my objective and every YouTuber that decides to talk about this kind of stuff is not to stop this type of stuff. We're not trying to stop anything, really, necessarily. The idea is just to talk about it, to give another spin on it that the mainstream news is not showing you. And when the mainstream news shows it to you, they try to make it look real soft, like, real, it's not all that bad. But we give you other options to see so that way the people can make decisions for themselves. Sometimes it can be entertaining. Sometimes it's not so entertaining. To me, this isn't all that entertaining. It's kind of rough. Okay, it's kind of rough. The situation with the Tim Pool and the Kanye West, that was entertaining. Okay, but this, not so entertaining, at least in my opinion. But I wanted to bring that out. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. God bless you all, and see you again.